I don't think that, I definitely acknowledge it. And rivalries are great because of the buildup, right? And because of the excitement and all of that. And rivalries are great for I always jokingly say this, for about the first quarter or so. But at the end of the day, winning football games, it comes down to execution, comes down to playing with the right physicality, comes down to playing, how you play in the critical moments, the special situations as they present themselves. And I think you perform well in those situations through really good preparation. And so as much as we'll acknowledge the rivalry, as much as we'll acknowledge, trying to play to get ourselves in the SEC championship game, we're going to come right back to today and what do we need to do today to put forth a positive performance. And so, and that's not new for us. That's kind of how we've always kind of gone about it. We acknowledge the game and what the game is about, and then we get right back to what do we need to do to perform.
And that is Texas football head coach Steve Sarkisian leading us into our discussion today on the Horns Report. Thank you for joining us from the KXAN Live studios. I'm Billy Gates, and with me to chat about the Lone Star Showdown, the Texas A&M rivalry that's being renewed it's been played, well, it hasn't been played since 13 years ago, which is crazy to think about, is Roger Wallace, KXAN Sports Director. And Roger, I know you've seen this game a time or two in your day. I mean, this is pretty exciting for it to be played again.
No doubt. And this is pretty much the first thing people thought about in July of 21 when Texas and Oklahoma moved into the SEC and the rivalry renewed. And that 11 game, obviously, Texas has been sitting on that Justin Tucker field goal for quite some time.
They've been having a good time with it.
But it's interesting because, as Sark said, they'll talk about the rivalry. But unlike even Arkansas, a lot of these guys, played against Arkansas in 21, and obviously OU, they play every year. It's like it's talked about, but they don't really know what it's like to be in it. And so that's what makes this one fascinating as Texas goes to College Station on Saturday night. And then, oh, by the way, all that's on the line, including winner to the SEC championship game. Texas wins, they're in the football playoff. If they don't win, still a decent chance, but then they're going to have to grind it out for a week. And obviously the Aggies, with that third loss on Saturday, they probably need to win out, beat Texas and beat Georgia to get to the college football playoff. So many subplots and twists and turns. And the bottom line is, and I say this, yeah, it's about bragging rights, but to me, there's more on the line than bragging rights in this case.
Right, yeah, especially now since, they're in the same conference again. That was the reason why they hadn't played the game, is because Texas A&M went to the SEC, was it 13 years ago?
Yeah, and they were clear. They didn't want Texas in the SEC. There's that as well. But, I mean, that was so long ago. Yeah. Even 3 years ago was so long ago that and that's Sark's point. And, you've been to the Texas OU game. Mm-hmm. You realize all the buildup and all that. And then, it's the old Mike Tyson thing. You have a plan until you get hit in the face. And I'm sure Texas will get hit in the face and they'll realize, all right, we're just in another game. And same with Texas A&M.
Now, I mean, it's our job to look ahead of stuff. Obviously, Steve Sarkisian, his coaching staff, his players, they're focused on the now. They live where their feet are, as we've heard from literally every UT coach ever this season. But if Texas wins, obviously they play Georgia for the SEC title. They get another crack at the Bulldogs, who handled them thoroughly at DKR during the regular season. But if they lose, like you've said earlier, they're going to have to sweat it out a little bit through conference championship week, and then they're going to have to rely on the committee to see where they fall in that CFP conversation. I mean, just as long as they win, they're fine. I mean, it's one of those things where you control your own way. If you lose, that's when things get a little hairy.
Yeah, and you look at the schedule, and the schedule now doesn't look like the schedule in August. Some teams that weren't that good. But then Oklahoma, they jump up and they beat Alabama. They're bowl eligible, so suddenly that win gets a little bit better.
Yeah.
Arkansas just got bowl eligible. That win gets a little bit better. And then some of those non-conference games, those are bowl eligible teams. I saw a stat. They beat the most bowl eligible teams at 7. None of them are outstanding. None of them are top 15 teams. So you've got that argument on their side, even though the the schedule didn't play out like people thought. But I think they would need some. I think they would need some help if A&M went on to win the SEC championship.
Sure.
If Texas loses and then Georgia wins it, I think they're safely in alongside Tennessee. They take care of business. They don't have a gimme against Vanderbilt. And then you look at some other games. What if USC upsets Notre Dame? Because Notre Dame has no path to the automatic.
Right.
So then they're sitting there with 2 losses. You take a 2-loss Texas team or a 2-loss Notre Dame. Well, Notre Dame won at A&M. That might, put them over the top as well. So yeah, there's a lot of different things that have to be looked at. And we're kind of at that college basketball selection show mindset right now.
Right. Yeah, and like the only time we're gonna know for sure is when they come on the TV December 8th and like they're starting to fill out the brackets. So we can speculate and pontificate all we want, but the only time we're gonna know December 8th, right after all those conference championship games, to have the committee tell us what's going on.
Well, and the other aspect that fans aren't used to is kind of planning things, and I think you can safely plan if Texas wins Saturday. At worst, they're going to host a first-round game that weekend before the quarterfinals at New Year's 2021, 20 and 21. So at worst, they would be that 5, 6, 7, or 8 and host a game. If they win out, then their New Year's and New Year's Eve options are likely the Sugar Bowl. The SEC champion, I believe, will be slated for the Sugar Bowl, and unless something unusual happens, but I'm pretty sure that is what would happen. They'd be going back to New Orleans. So it's hard to imagine that this is a team that all the things that are in front of, including being left out of the 12-team playoff, and talk about having to settle for a bowl game. You think about people that would opt out and disinterest and all that.
Oh, yeah.
That would take Sark's greatest coaching job to get them fired up to play in a bowl game after what we've been talking about every week.
Yeah.
Even after Georgia, they were still sitting there in the top 10.
Yeah, and I haven't looked at the recent bowl sort of assignments for conferences because I'm used to Big 12 or whatever. But like, where would the SEC team if they were in sort of like Texas's sort of scenario, would they end up going to like the Outback Bowl or the Citrus Bowl or something?
Good chance Florida. The SEC is different.
Yeah.
And I don't believe they say this, but it's pretty much known that they place their teams in bowl games as opposed to, for instance, the Big 12, where there's a pecking order of bowls choose. And that's one reason Texas never played A&M in a bowl game.
Yeah.
It was always talk, could they meet, especially in the Texas Bowl.
Sure.
But I don't think A&M wanted to play Texas in a bowl game, and so therefore they conveyed that to the SEC. And I'm pretty sure that the SEC, again, most think that they place their teams.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Yeah. It's funny. You're right, though. I haven't really looked at the tie-ins compared to in years past because it was kind of an all or nothing scenario.
Yeah. Well, let's go back a little bit to the game against Kentucky, the 31-14 win. Specifically, I want to talk about the last drive of the game, that 15-play masterpiece of all running plays that took 86 yards, chewed up over 8 minutes there in the fourth quarter, and ended in a 1-yard Trey Wisner touchdown. I mean, just from my football appreciation standpoint as a former high school running back, I loved every second of that. Just like showing teams that Texas is capable of that type of punishing, pounding running style. That's got to make some other teams kind of raise their eyebrows a little bit, don't you think?
Yeah, and it's a team that at times has had trouble running the ball here in the second half of the season. And Sark always says that the key to a great running game is to be able to run when everybody knows you're going to run.
Exactly. Yeah.
And we all knew they were going to run on that last drive.
Yeah.
And if they don't score, they probably still win the game because Kentucky wasn't moving it. They got the technically it was a fumble recovery.
Yeah.
When Quinn Ewers lost the ball, but to do it in that way, to kind of put a stamp on a game that kind of got a little sideways in the second half was impressive. Trey Wisner was impressive. Jaden Blue got back in there. Of course, he's at the fumble issues. He was carrying a football today when he was available with the media. He had a ball tucked away. And
Good.
Sark and he crossed paths walking into the room. And Sark took some swipes at the ball.
Nice.
So, but it's cool because it's your head coach, and coaches hate nothing more than guys fumbling. But
Right.
he was good natured with Jaden. So the running game and the offensive line, they've taken a little heat this year.
Yeah.
For them to just be steamrollers against a pretty good Kentucky defense and
Yeah.
just kind of stole their soul on that drive. And I think it helped too because we all know Quinn Ewers wasn't 100%.
Right, exactly. That's where I was headed next, yeah.
Suddenly you're not having to roll him out or drop him back and risk him having to move around in the pocket. So it also served a purpose there to kind of preserve Quinn. And we don't know his status. They didn't practice early.
Right.
Normally they practice before Sark talks on Monday, but because of the holiday schedule, he's going to practice this afternoon. And so, we're not going to get an update till the injury report, availability report from the SEC on Wednesday evening.
I mean, when Sark was asked about it today, I mean, he didn't really sound worried. Like he said that Quinn was planning on practicing and everything, but it didn't sound like he was worried. But then again, I mean, I guess you never really know until
the one report that he was going to have an MRI came out yesterday, but there hasn't been a lot of noise about it either. And usually between agents and families, some of that gets out. But again, even if he's good to go, unless he really makes a miraculous turnaround treatment-wise, he was hobbled. It was clear he was frustrated about being hobbled. I think of that the second touchdown to Gunnar Helm, which normally would get a great response from Quinn. He just kind of walked to the sideline.
Yeah.
And so you can tell he's a little frustrated. Obviously, that's huge to have a healthy Ewers going into this environment. And, it would be amazing if he couldn't go and all of a sudden Arch Manning's asked to win this game, to get Texas to the SEC championship, et cetera.
That would be quite an environment for a young kid to come in and try to navigate. And that actually brings me to my next point. Another thing Sark talked about was his veteran group of leaders on the team, his senior leadership, particularly on the offensive line. They've been to Alabama.
Yep.
They've been to Michigan. Like they handle those hostile environments pretty well. They played fairly clean games up front. Not a lot of pre-snap penalties, not a lot of the false starts you see. They're all lining up on the line of scrimmage. They're not trying to cheat back a little bit, then get flagged for an illegal formation. These guys have sort of been there and done that, but then again, they haven't been to Kyle Field and the 12th man's howling.
No, they're right. I mean, this is a different animal. Maybe the best defensive front that they've had to face. We thought Michigan maybe was a little bit better than they are. Obviously, Oklahoma, great game on Saturday against Alabama, but Texas took care of business with them. So, you combine the atmosphere and the fact that Texas A&M is really talented on that defensive front. That's going to be a big test. Test to keep Quinn Ewers upright, keep him from having to scramble and take sacks, and most importantly, turn the ball over, not turn the ball over. So, I mean, I think you're right. I think it's the ultimate road test for this season by far.
And Texas has won their last 10 true road games. Sarkisian also, he addressed that during the media availability today, saying that, his guys are they're just composed. Like they try to preach that, during the summer, during training camp, all season long. They pounded into their players' head that you have to have an even keel, you have to have a clear mind when you're in, crazy situations like you might find yourself in Kyle Field. He just says that his guys, they just go out and they just play football, which, I mean, at the end of the day, that's what you have to do in these sort of rivalry kind of environments. Yeah,
I mean, he talked about, the first quarter, you settle in, as I mentioned earlier, and then you just got to play. And, the crowd is the crowd. It's going to be loud. It's loud at DKR, just kind of in a different feel for Texas. But still, if they can get on the Aggies and all of a sudden they're having a ball, silencing the crowd, there's that effect too. So who knows how much effect, and I think you brought up a good point, is the crowd has an effect when all of a sudden you're jumping off sides and having to call a timeout, taking a delay a game. Other than that, maybe it gives the Aggies a little momentum when things are going well and a little extra juice. But hard for that juice to be given from the crowd to the team for 3.5 hours. That, typically, unless you start turning the ball over, the better team, for the most part, wins these games. But there are those intangibles like what we just talked about.
Yeah. And Texas A&M quarterback Marcel Reed, he's taken over full-time for Connor Wegman, and he just provides so much more for defenses to game plan for. I mean, he's kind of like from stature standpoint, he's a smaller Taylon Green, but he's a better decision maker, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I remember sitting in Nashville after Texas played Vanderbilt, watching that game, and LSU was handing it to the Aggies, and they finally made that switch, and Marcel Reed was. I mean, You're like, whoa, this dude is different the way he moves around, even maybe a little quicker also than Taylon Green. I thought Texas kind of made Taylon Green look a little slow. He might have been nicked up, but Reed's a guy that, he plays with a lot of emotion. So, he gets going early. That could be tough for Texas as well, because I think he's the most dynamic two-way of all the guys. Hawkins never got going for Oklahoma. Talked about Green never got going. Van Buren never got going for Mississippi State. So, this might be the one where they have the most trouble with.
And the Aggies have to be a little angry about how last week went. I mean, even though I watched that whole thing, that 43-41 quadruple overtime loss to Auburn. It didn't really take anything away from the Lone Star Showdown. Like, the winner is still going to go to the SEC title game, but man, like, that just shows you the power of home field in the SEC, because Auburn hasn't played very well or very consistent at all this season, and they jump out to a 21-0 lead. Texas A&M comes back, ties the game, and then they sort of go punch for punch the rest of the way until that fourth overtime, where, I mean, at that point, it's a lottery system. Like, it's a bingo call.
Free throw shooting contest.
When it comes to dueling 2-point conversions. I mean, if you're Texas A&M, sure, you're probably mad about that, but at the same time, like, that was a heck of a football game.
It was, and they took the lead. Auburn had to kick a field goal. Had a chance to win it in the red zone, couldn't do it. I think what it did for A&M, it took their margin for error away. I think if they win that game, beat Texas, then they're in the playoff regardless of what happens in the SEC championship game, sitting there with 2 losses and having gotten to the game and having beaten a top 5 team in Texas. So that hurt them from that standpoint, but you're right. They're still right there. It also, everything's clear now. Remember last week and the last 2 weeks, we've been talking about all the possibilities.
Right.
And lo and behold, here we are, and it's simple. Georgia's waiting, and Texas and Texas A&M trying to play Georgia. And, oh, by the way, go look at the old conference the Longhorns are in, and somebody's figured it out. But if they hadn't, try to figure out how the Big 12 shakes out going into the final week. It's a mess.
Like, I mean, with the Big Ten taking 3 days to figure out that Oregon was going to be in their conference championship game, the Big 12 has an even bigger mess on their hands. That's a dumpster fire.
Yeah, well, you got a whole bunch of 2-loss teams, so this will be an interesting weekend for them.
Yeah, so 6:30 on Saturday at Kyle Field in College Station, the Lone Star Showdown, the rivalry renewed. Texas and Texas A&M, they're going to play again finally. I know there's a lot of happy people to see this game happening. It's not going to be on Thanksgiving, which is a little bit of a bummer, but it's close. You got to take the good out of this thing.
The other thing interesting, Billy, real quick, is that in the current plan of 8 games, there's no guarantee this is going to be every year, because Texas and Oklahoma will play every year. So if they stay at 8 games, it's not going to be that what they talked about, that pod system where you have 3 games you're guaranteed it would be Texas A&M, OU, and Arkansas. But under this 8-game format, if they don't go to 9, next year is it for a while. They'll break away, have other home and homes with the SEC, and have to circle back. If they go to 9, almost certainly they'll keep the 3 rivalry games. So, and coaches, obviously the coaches don't really want 9.
No.
That's one more conference loss chance and one less home game potentially because of the 4 non-conference. So that would be interesting if they play twice and all of a sudden they break for 4 years.
Yeah. Yeah, it would give the other SEC teams a chance to not play Mercer or somebody.
That's true.
Or UTEP or some other non-power conference team that they're going to beat by 50 in their SEC bye week. So
the non-bye in November.
Yeah. All right. Well, 6:30 on Saturday, the Lone Star Showdown at Kyle Field in College Station. The game's going to be on ABC. If you can get out there for the game, that's even better. But if you can watch on TV, that's cool too. We'll have all your coverage here, KXAN.com, and over the air all week long. And also, happy Thanksgiving for those who celebrate that. That's coming up on Thursday, and I know we'll be celebrating. Roger, you'll actually kind of be headed to Florida by then, won't you?
Yeah, I've got to miss this one, Billy.
Yeah.
I'm going with the UT women down to the Florida Gulf Coast showcase. The UT women are going to play 3 games in Southwest Florida on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So I will be with the now 5th-ranked Longhorns this weekend and not in College Station.
Well, Noah and Todd and I will tell you how it was.
I have a hunch how it's going to be. I don't know what the result, but I know it's how it's going to be.
You've seen this game a time or two.
That's right.
All righty. Well, hey, we're going to leave it here for this episode of the Horns Report. Thanks so much for watching. And for Roger Wallace, I'm Billy Gates, and we'll talk to you again very soon.